This is a story about a rhythm game that is over 10 years old. It's about a very unique rhythm game that took a lot of steps to innovate and be different from its competition. It's about a game that over time took steps to improve itself, become polished, and be host to a variety of interesting ideas. It's about a mainstay rhythm game that never really got the spotlight, but always was there waiting for you in the background. This is a story about a murder. Well, would you look at that? It's another touchscreen rhythm game. It's finally time to talk about the game that I've used in the intro of about half of my rhythm game videos. It's the game I think of when I think about Konami innovating with their rhythm games, so it ends up as a great example of a rhythm game that not many people have seen before. It's a game I hold a special place for, and we finally get to talk about it today. So welcome everyone to Reflec Beat. Reflec Beat is a touchscreen rhythm game by Konami, originally released on November 4th, 2010. At this point in Bemani's history, the series of rhythm games had drifted away from games that emulated instruments to more abstract and innovative gameplay concepts, as also seen in the rhythm game released just before this, U-Beat. The game had 6 location tests before releasing, which is honestly kind of a lot, even for a new game. The mascot of the game is Pastel-kun, a little purple mouse character that's present throughout the series. The player is often able to customize Pastel through different events, and honestly, he's one of my favorite characters we've seen in Bemani. The game itself has seen a wide range of artists as its director, with names like DJ Yoshitaka, Crispy Joybox, DJ Toto, and Desro. Reflec Beat is the air hockey game. The gameplay is characterized by an honestly absurd amount of objects flying all over the screen like air hockey pucks. A majority of the notes are spawned and sent in a random direction, whether down toward the playfield or at differing angles bouncing off the walls. This combination of random spawning notes and different trajectories creates a rhythm game characterized as nothing short of an assault of notes on the playfield, with the player frantically tapping them as the notes fly toward the player's strike line. The notes in the game are called objects, and there are many differing types of them throughout the series. We'll touch on them as they get added in the different versions, but for now let's just talk about the objects seen in the base version of Reflec Beat. I should probably also mention why you're seeing 2 sets of notes. In Reflec Beat, you're always playing against a rival. This is a CPU opponent who uses the opposite color notes as the player. We won't spend too much time talking about the rival throughout the video, but just know that it's who you're playing against and who may fire more difficult notes at you from time to time. Generally throughout the series, the rival will get harder as the player's skill rises. Aside from the standard objects that fly around on the screen, there are also gold objects. Gold objects spawn more of the rival color when they're touched, leaning heavily into the dueling aspect of the rival part of the game. Gold objects also provide an opportunity to use one of Reflec Beat's unique mechanics known as Just Reflec. On the gameplay screen of Reflec Beat is a gauge known as the Just Reflec gauge. This gauge builds up over gameplay and has charges seen by the segments of the bar. Once you have at least one segment, you can perform a Just Reflec. This is done by flicking a gold object with the perfect timing window while you have a segment of the meter. This will activate a Just Reflec and send Just Reflec objects toward your rival. Just Reflec objects fly faster than regular notes and give the player performing the Just Reflec bonus points. Not only that, but if the target of the Just Reflec object misses, they lose points. This is known as Just Reflec damage. The Just Reflec adds a good amount of depth in the gameplay and incentivizes players to use Just Reflec to score extra points. Outside of that, you also have chain objects. Chain objects are used to sort of indicate standardized timing across a group of notes, and also to put them close together so that you know they all have the same musical timing. They're characterized by a chain running between the set of notes that all use the same timing. Think of this sort of like a drill from a dance game in terms of timing. In the original Reflec Beat, the rival was a lot more important and you actually needed to beat the rival in order to have your play considered a clear. This ended up being relaxed in following versions, but you can see just how core to the design the rival was in the original incarnation of the game, as it was a very unique aspect of Reflec. It wouldn't be long before this officially became a new series, and so onward we go to the next incarnation of Reflec. Up next we have Reflec Beat Limelight, released on November 6, 2011. Aside from a few small game updates like increasing the max difficulty of the game to 10+, the major addition for Limelight was top objects. Fittingly to Limelight's name, green object fields have been placed above the standard judgment line. These fields have their own exclusive note type, top objects. These new higher up judgment fields are reserved for this note type, which, unlike the standard objects, always fly directly toward the judgment field. They do not have a random trajectory like standard objects. On hard or higher charts, there are 3 top object judgment spots, and below that there are just 2. This added not only a new degree of depth to Reflec Beat's gameplay, but also difficulty, as the player now had another aspect to keep track of amid the flurry of notes on the screen. The other notable gameplay change that came with Reflec Beat Limelight was that you don't actually have to beat the rival to clear the song. You just had to get 70% score rate to have it be considered a clear, sort of like a minimum required performance. They probably realized that having to specifically beat the AI was either way too hard or way too easy and wasn't really a great indicator of whether you played the song well enough. They did keep the rival in though as something to sort of play and score against. From here, Reflec Beat has its main mechanics established and has sort of proven itself to have some staying power, at least enough to get some more versions. The gameplay is being refined and the game itself is getting a lot of new content. Moving into the next version, Reflec would really begin to define what made it unique. Up next is Reflec Beat Colette. The third version of Reflec Beat would take a drastically different approach to the updates during its life, but we'll get back to that in a second. This version included a few more tweaks to gameplay. It had a slightly tighter judgment window compared to the last version, making the game a bit more precise. They also introduced backward just reflects, which made the note fly faster than if you did a regular just reflect going forward. By the time I had tried Reflec Beat, this feature was already in the game, and for me it always felt more natural to flick the note backwards, so I think this was a really smart addition to gameplay. The major interesting feature for Colette was that it was based on seasons. The lifespan of a typical Konami rhythm game version at the time was about 1 year or so, and in this case they decided to go with a more literal approach to that and actually make the game take place across 4 real seasons. The color of the cabinet lights would be different for each version, and the game would be home to Reflec Beat's most ambitious event series yet, Pastel Adventure. Pastel Adventure is a multi-event series spanning the duration of Colette's life, and also some future versions after. It was the start of Reflec Beat running some of the most insane song unlock events I've ever seen. Since we've touched on most of the gameplay at this point in the video, we're going to shift our focus to some of the unique unlock events the game had to offer, as I'd like to not only show them off, but also document them, since they are some very niche pieces of gaming content. A lot of these don't have a lot of footage at all, but I did my best to scrape together footage so you could at least see what they look like. So with that out of the way, let's check out the events for Colette Winter. Winter was the first season for Colette, and the Pastel Adventure for Winter was Colette Climbing. Colette Climbing was an unlock event where you climb a mountain to unlock songs. Basically, you'd select a mountain to climb, each with specific songs attached. Through a few variables like your performance for that set, equipment, rival rating, and a little bit of luck, you'd gain progress up the mountain. When you made it to checkpoints, you would unlock a song. Clearing 2 of the 3 Colette mountains would allow you a chance at the legendary mountain, where you could unlock the final song for the event, Volta. This kind of unique post-game unlock event would become common throughout Reflec Beat's life, with an emphasis on unique minigame progress over the course of sets rather than doing something like buying songs from a shop in-game. Colette Winter ran from November 21st, 2012 to March 17th, 2013, and on we go to Colette Spring. In Colette Spring, we're taking a break from climbing and doing some gardening. Spring's event was Colette Gardening. They turn up the complexity in this minigame with tons of stuff to choose from. The first screen that appears gives you an option to select seeds to plant inside vases. Afterward, you're given a set of Pastel-kun characters to choose to drag to your vases to grow them. There's also a workshop you can access to craft more benches and grow more seeds in more vases at a time. And finishing growing a plant unlocks a song. Getting all the way to the end and growing the legendary seed would present you with the event's final song, Stray March. Now that we're done doing our spring gardening, let's head into summer. Up next is the summer season, and of course with it is the third event in Pastel Adventure. The third event is Colette Fishing. This season's unlock minigame presents players with a selection of islands to fish at, and the player is given a choice of bait. Depending on a few factors like bait choice, the specific fish, level of equipment, and other factors, the player will fill the meters of the different fish you can catch, which unlocks a song when you fill the meter. Unfortunately, in this game, you can also catch trash. which doesn't help you progress at all. This minigame also had a secret unlockable song. If you play 3 songs that have either the word black, the number 96, which sounds like the word kuro, which means black in Japanese, or the kanji kuro, which is the character for black, the ship you get for the fishing minigame will be black, and you get access to the secret song, which is a crossover from pop and music. On to our last season, Autumn. With Autumn came the final seasonal event for Pastel Adventure, Colette Harvest. Colette Harvest involved selecting a basket for Pastel-kun, who then navigates his way through a forest. The player is given choices when Pastel gets to a fork in the road, and each path yields different rewards. Filling up Pastel's basket unlocks a new song. There were 3 phases for this event, culminating in the final unlock for the final phase, the song fittingly titled Fallen Leaves. At this point, a full year had passed. Every season had been hit, and Colette had run its full course as a version, presenting players with new songs and fun unlock events along the way. If I had to guess, most people probably thought that Colette was going to wrap up as a version here, but we weren't done yet. Colette had one more trick up its sleeve. The finale of Reflec Beat Colette arrived with the release of Colette All Seasons. This was the sort of conclusion phase for the mix that the game was changed to after the autumn phase ended. Pastel Adventure was done at this point in the version, but All Seasons would not be one to be outdone. All Seasons concluded the mix with one of the most bonkers events I have ever seen in a rhythm game, known as Pastel Wonder Traveler. After playing 5 credits of All Seasons, you'll be presented with the Wonder Traveler folder. Inside the folder is 4 bosses, each with their own mission. The bosses are themed on cards, so there's a spade, club, heart, and diamond boss. Each boss has a mission requirement before you're able to face off against the boss. The missions were things like playing 15 songs in All Seasons, or playing a set with the first characters of the song you play being ha, a, to in order, which sounds like heart in Japanese. Doing the mission will give you access to the folder again to face off against the boss of choice. During the boss fight song, your clear gauge is replaced with a health meter, which will go up and down depending on how you perform. If you run out of health and fail the song, the HP damage you did to the boss remains, and you can challenge the boss again on the next credit. Once the player has defeated the spade, club, heart, and diamond bosses, each one will leave behind an orb. This is phase 2 of the event, in which you rebuild the Wonder Clock. Once you have an orb, you need to go back and play the respective finale song from Pastel Adventure throughout Colette to turn the orb into one of the hands of the Wonder Clock, those songs being Valanga, Stray March, Waratsumi, and Fallen Leaves. Once the clock is rebuilt, you have a chance at the finale of the event, the Joker boss. The Joker boss throws the finale of Colette at you, Clamare. This is a brutal finale song to see if you've got what it takes to take down the Joker. It's a brutal event too, and you better hope you can beat him in one shot. If you fail to deplete the Joker's health, while it does remain for next time, every boss revives, and you must defeat them all again to try one more time. A minimum of 4 more credits just to see the Joker boss again. Not only that, the most insane thing to me is that at the time this event released, defeating the boss songs and the Joker didn't even unlock them in the regular game. They were added to the main game later, but Clamare, the final song, didn't even show up in the main game until the next version. Truly, Pastel Wonder Traveler is an insane unlock event and a great finale for a version covered in unique unlock events. It really shows you what kind of interesting stuff Konami was willing to do with Reflec Beat, and I really don't think I've ever seen an event like this in another rhythm game. With the Joker boss defeated and the Wonder Clock rebuilt, All Seasons comes to a close, and we can finally put a wrap on Colette. From here, we're moving into what I would dub Phase 2 of Reflec Beat. We take a short detour from insane unlock events to move back more into gameplay and quality of life updates, so with that, let's move over to Reflec Beat Groovin'. Reflec Beat Groovin' takes a step back from the heavy emphasis on events and seasonal changes in favor of some more additions to the main game. This far into the series, and they are now just adding a song shop with a currency system, something more traditional for rhythm games, though unlock events were retained. Special difficulty charts were also added. These are similar to challenge charts in DDR. They are not necessarily harder charts, just alternate charts. In terms of game features, this version also finally added Dan courses to Reflec Beat in the form of the Reflec Dojo. For Reflec Beat as a series, Groovin' marked the first release with a trend of giving nearly all the unlockable songs from the previous version to the player at the start of the new mix. Some of the special event boss songs had to be purchased from the new store, and songs from crossover events like Floor Infection didn't get unlocked. Don't worry, we'll talk about floor infection later. We also got one new note type. Vertical objects are new to Groovin and fly straight down toward the judgment line rather than bouncing off the walls. These can inherit any of the other note types like long objects and just reflect objects. These help to add some variety to charts and are a solid addition like most note types. Lots of good, interesting stuff in Groovin, and a great start to what will become a time period for Reflec of very solid quality of life updates. Reflec Beat Groovin was also home to one of the weirdest crossover events Bemani has ever done. There was a crossover event with Coca-Cola. The Coke x Bemani crossover is a bit infamous for being just a super weird event. Basically, the idea of this event was that by buying certain Coke products, the store would provide you with a D ticket? On screen now, I believe, is the D ticket itself, which had a code as well as a limited edition e-amusement pass matching one of the beverages. The drinks you could choose from included Sprite, some coffee drinks, Fanta Grape, and a few others. This D ticket could be used once a day during the event to enable custom Coke x Bemani related frames, lane covers, and songs. For Reflec Beat, during Groovin, there was one song available this way, a crossover from Beatmania 2DX. In the extend version of Groovin, which we'll talk about shortly, 2 more were added. Later down the line after this event ended, everyone got all 3 songs by default as well. It wasn't even for very long that they were event-exclusive songs. It's just a super weird event. Those e-amusement passes have become super expensive, and the whole event has sort of become a fabled meme in the Bemani community. Oh, and the best part of the whole event? Coke wasn't even a drink option. You didn't get anything for buying Coke in the Coke x Bemani event. What the hell, dude? After Groovin came the extend version, Groovin Upper. These extend versions, like the others, tend to add a bit less content, but that's not to say there's nothing to talk about. Some new clear gauges were added, Den courses had a new highest level added, as well as hard mode courses, and a few customization options were added. I mentioned Floor Infection earlier, which is a crossover event many Bemani games have with Sound Voltex. Since there won't be a Dead Rhythm Games video on Sound Voltex, at least not now, let's use this time to briefly touch on Floor Infection. Floor Infection is an event that allows players of other games to unlock contest songs from the Sound Voltex Floor events, which are contest events where songs are submitted by artists to be accepted into the game. During the event period, you have to play a certain number of sets of Sound Voltex to unlock the songs in other games. This event had a counterpart event for unlocking songs in Sound Voltex called Policy Break, where playing sets of the other game unlocks those songs in Sound Voltex. These Floor Infection events would run for about 2 weeks, and have been run many times since the first one, with different songs each time. Floor Infection songs, at least in the US and places with less access to Bemani, are generally considered the rarest songs to have unlocked, since if you miss the unlock period, unlocking the songs elsewhere is impossible. A handful of them get added to a game's unlock system, and occasionally there are revival events where the songs are available on Floor Infection again, but otherwise you're out of luck if you miss them. It's a cool event that's a little divisive for people in situations like America, where you might be near a Dave & Buster's that has a DDR, but no Sound Voltex cab. So if you want to get Floor Infection songs unlocked, you have to pay someone near a machine to play on your profile to unlock them. Reflec Beat was one of the games that participated in Floor Infection and also Policy Break, and as far as I can tell, Groovin Upper was the first time Reflec Beat participated in it. Coming toward the end of Phase 2, we have Reflec Beat Volta. Volta was in a similar vein to Groovin, having many quality of life and gameplay updates. For starters, they expanded the difficulty scale upwards a bit, from the old max of 10+ all the way up to 13. All the songs from base Groovin were unlocked for everyone by default on release of this version, and a new gameplay object was added. The slide object is a hold note that must be followed as it moves left and right. Some old songs even got new charts with this note type known as renewal charts. At this point, Reflec is really solidifying, and there are less drastic changes being made. I'd argue that Phase 2 of Reflec is really the best the game had to offer, and the song list was really starting to get built out after all those versions. Going back a bit to the Colette ways, Volta had a few really unique events. One of my favorites is Reflec Derby, which was an event related to the Konami Arcade Championship. In the finals of the KAC tournaments for each game, a new boss song is revealed, and the players face off on it for their final song. If you were able to guess which 2 players were in the final match at KAC that year, you got to play the newly revealed boss song, Rebellio, early. There was also Ultimate Survival, a sort of battle event against members of the 2 main record labels that produce music for rhythm games in Japan, that being Hardcore Tano C and Beat Nation Rise. Reflec Beat has been running for 5 years at this point, showing its staying power and ability to be an innovative rhythm game with unique gameplay, events, and songs. Before we move on, let's take a quick detour over to the home versions of Reflec Beat. As you'd probably expect, the home releases of Reflec Beat were on mobile devices. On iOS in Japan, Reflec Beat Plus was available. It was released in 2011 as a free download with song packs you can buy. As it went on, a lot of the new version's features were added to the game, as well as themes to match. The JP version of the game has an absolute ton of packs and got support for new content until about 2014. There was also a US version of this game known as Reflec Beat Plus, but with a plus sign instead of the word plus. This was the only official release of Reflec Beat for the US and was also an international release. It had a similar pack content style to that of the Japanese version, however it had a lot less packs. It also didn't seem to get the same quality of life features the Japanese version got, at least not all of them. Classic NA getting left in the dust as usual. This game also continued until around 2014, stopping with theme updates at Colette. With that, we've covered the home releases for the game, and we can move on to the final act. Up next is Volta's Extend Mix, Volsa II. Yet another update providing high amounts of quality of life and extending the now very large song list. Right off the bat, the biggest update to gameplay was that you could now turn off the rival objects. This is easily the biggest quality of life update the game ever got. It makes gameplay significantly clearer without removing the functionality of the rival. This is huge and showed Konami's testament to keeping this game up to date with quality features that make the game better to play. They put a lot of good effort into Volta 2's songs as well, with every Volta 2 song getting a special chart, unlocked with a certain rank on the hard chart. It had new floor infection songs, a bonus song for the previously mentioned Ultimate Survival event, crossovers with Beatmania 2DX Copula, and more. This was a super solid Extend version, with more quality of life improvements and new songs to boot. At this point, Reflec is a well-established series. It was bringing consistent revenue for Konami, being one of its longest-running active rhythm game series at this point. Nearly 7 years of solid releases, improvements, and the weirdest unlock events you could find. The series was, by all accounts, peaking at Volta, and surely this was a sign of more good things to come. What came next was nothing short of murder. A murder in which Reflec Beat was taken out back with a shotgun and put out to pasture. Released in 2016 was the final version of Reflec Beat. Reflec Beat Yukyu no Reflexia, translated to the Reflexia of Eternity. This was a rework of the entire game. The game's difficulty scale was changed to that of 1 to 15, the timing window of the game was loosened, slide objects were removed, and replacing it came 2 new note types. First was the switch long object. This is a hold type note where you had to hold it while it was on, and avoid the note while it was off. This note type is fine. I feel this fits Reflec Beat pretty well, although I'm not sure why slide objects were removed in its place. The second note type is pretty infamous. Big bang notes are the second note type added to Reflexia. These are just like wide notes. They're really long bars, and you can hit any part of them. They cause a big screen shake effect. They're basically a cosmetic note and don't really fit the game at all. The note type changes were, needless to say, confusing. A game that had been adding and refining its gameplay for over 5 years, only to do a big 180 and change some stuff, was pretty egregious to say the least. But what really put the nail in the coffin, or the bullet in the head, for Reflec as a series was the consequence of changing note types so heavily. At launch, almost every Konami original song was removed, along with a ton of others. The problem was the new note types, and also the removed ones. To accommodate the new notes, almost all the charts had to either be redone or removed. Here's a list. I'm not kidding. Konami shit all over the 7 years of content they had built up. At this point in Reflec's history, its song list was considered one of its best and most defining aspects, and now a majority of it was just completely gone. What came next I can only describe as a complete backpedal and waste of time and money. Konami would go on to spend the next 4 years redoing charts for removed songs and adding them back in batches of song revivals. The process went well past the event window for the game, with the last events for Reflexia ending in 2019. The most recent song revival was in March of 2020. The game is basically on life support now. It's still on eAmusement, but it hasn't gotten an update in a year and a half. Due to the complete and utter lack of awareness on what this whole thing would cause, Reflec Beat declined in popularity quickly due to severe lack of content and confusingly pointless direction change. Reflec is now a shell of its former self, a well-established rhythm game boasting unique events, songs, and gameplay, killed off in its prime. If you've been following along throughout the series, you'll know that some of Konami's most infamous moves and misplays when it comes to rhythm games were knee-jerk reactions due to competition. So, here's my theory. This is all speculation based on what was happening in the rhythm game scene at the time, as well as before and since this has happened. In my opinion, and the opinion of some others, this was a lazy effort from Konami to take a shot at Sega and Them. For those who don't know, around this time there was a ton of traction for Them gaining popularity. I had heard stories around this time of arcade owners in Japan getting rid of their other machines to make room for more Them. Historically, Konami hadn't had too many direct competitors when it came to rhythm games up to this point. This was a shitty effort to make the gameplay flashy and similar to Them without taking any time to innovate. If you're not seeing it, by the way, switch long objects create gameplay similar to lifts in Them, and Big Bang objects create gameplay similar to the crit objects seen in Them. While their goal was to create a similar gameplay experience, in reality, they took a huge dent out of the uniqueness of the game, as well as literally deleting years of content for no reason. Reflec was likely one of Konami's worst series moves ever in the history of Bemani, and a tragedy for fans of Reflec Beat. It's unknown what will happen from here, considering that eAmusement is still enabled for the game, but as far as I'm concerned, Reflec is dead. Even if this isn't the last version, it's dead in spirit, and Konami killed it with Reflec. Thanks for watching. Check out my Twitter and my Twitch, links are in the description below. You can also check out my Patreon if you want to support my content. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.